Today we're going to talk about how to control your voice better. If you sometimes have the feeling you don't have control over your voice, maybe you're getting a little flat, a little sharp, a little wobbly, a little shaky, we're going to talk about everything today. Let's just have a little chat. So here are some elements that you have to put into place in order to have better control. Assuming your hearing is really good, which probably it is, you hear that something isn't quite right, but you don't know how to control your voice. Here is the first element. You need expansion and full lungs. So you want to always try to sing from the top of your breath as much as possible, because when you're at the very end of your breath, your support is not as good as it can be when you're having full lungs. So this would be the top of your breath. You want to breathe calmly. This can also happen when it has to be faster. So instead of, it can happen fast. What's important when you inhale is that you have an open pharyngeal space, like an open throat, so that the air can flow in without being hindered, without there being any constrictions or, narrow passages. You want to really inhale as freely as possible. And what you also want to do as you inhale, you want there to be expansion right around your ribs, your belly here. That's the natural motion. As your lungs fill up with air, they blow up, and your ribs and your belly, everything that's basically around your lungs needs to also expand. The cool thing is, as you have the expansion, in order to keep it, you need to engage those muscles that really control keeping the air in or letting it out. We call it the core muscles or your ab muscles, which are really not just your ab muscles, but it's all the way around here. Can you feel that as you're inhaling and you're keeping the air in without closing the epiglottis, keeping the throat nice and open? Can you feel that as you keep that nice expanded state, that there you need to work pretty hard down here at the core level in order to keep that expansion? As you have that expansion and you keep the control over what you do with the air that is flowing outward after you've taken it in, that's how you can dose the air. You want to manage the air. So what you can do now is take a straw or sing on a nasal sound and pay attention to how even the air flows. So the even breath flow is extremely important. When it doesn't flow evenly, this is what happens. Let's do chest voice. The pitch may vary slightly. Also, there may be slight accents. And that's something we usually don't want, because that's not anything we want to that we control, but we want to be in control. So you don't want the wobbliness, the shakiness. And you can practice that by starting on a nasal sound or with a straw and practice like all the while paying attention to letting the air out little by little in a very even way, as evenly as possible. And it should almost feel like you're trying to hold in the air, like you're trying to keep it in, hold your breath. Of course, you're not holding it, you're actually letting it out. But that sensation should feel like you're letting out very little. And in order to keep that air, you need that support engagement. Really important. So the next step in this equation, in order for that pitch to remain very nice and steady, for that air stream to be very even, you need a certain amount of compression. So at the level of the vocal cords, there can also be variation. So you can either have them close tighter or looser, and that really determines how much air fits through the vocal cords. So what you want to try to do is it's like you have to work together with your support and that airstream and the vocal cord closure. It's almost like when you have a straw and you're pinching it. As you're pinching it, less air travels through, but pressure increases in order for the air to keep flowing, because you have to push against that resistance a bit harder so that the air can still flow through. The same happens when you push the air through vocal cords that are very tightly closed. There needs to be a bit more pressure. We call it the subglottal pressure because it's the pressure that builds up right before the air travels through the vocal cords, the glottis. So that subglottal pressure and that air column that is below the vocal cords is very important in order to create that nice compressed sound so that you have better control. Now here's the deal. A lot of times the best way to control, or the easiest way, is like in the middle of a pitch. The beginning is hard and the end is hard because it's like the tail ends where you have to build up that support and compression and let go of it. As the vocal cords stop vibrating, it's like, okay, I'm letting go of that compression. But don't let go of the compression. As you're having an onset, make sure you already feel that level of support and airstream. You have to feel it before you actually start vocalizing. You have to have that expansion in your ribs, have taken in that air. And now as you're doing the onset, if you want more control in your onset, you have to have that compression and that control over how is that airstream traveling through my vocal cords and how is it making my vocal cords vibrate. Even when there's a sound that is not an open vowel, let's talk about a non-open vowel first. So when I have a ya or a na, these are voiced consonants that precede the open vowel. Those are voiced, that means there is an actual pitch. So don't perceive the beginning of the pitch as just the moment where the vowel begins, but where that voiced consonant is. So instead of ya, you don't want to accent because, hello, airstream isn't even. It's like, we don't want to give that accent off. What we want is that control. That moment of control, of absolute control in the beginning. Yeah. See, my vocal cords didn't close tightly in the beginning, so I had that short moment of That's also something where I don't have control. That's not anything I'm meant to do. Of course, you can add vocal fry if you do it on purpose, but the best way to really check and gauge your level of control is by beginning on an actual pitch without, with a clean sound. I have that compression and control before I even start. Let's talk about the ending of a pitch, and then we'll talk about the middle. The ending of a pitch is especially tricky because a lot of times you might be not on top of your breath anymore, of course, because you have sung the phrase shorter or longer depending on the piece of music, and now you're maybe on the bottom of your breath, and naturally it's a little bit harder to keep that expansion and compression because you're trying to press out the rest of the air that you have, and that's usually really hard to have a control because it's like you're pushing, and as your muscles push harder, it's not easy to control that evenness because they want to go like that, like you're squeezing it out. So resist that temptation to like squeeze it out. Let it flow very slowly, and here comes the most important part. Make sure that you keep the openness. You want to keep that openness in your pharyngeal space. You don't want your epiglottis to stop the pitch, meaning you don't want to close the pipe. So you don't want to go, yeah, oh. It's when I close the pipe when I don't have full control. I have best control when I keep the space in my pharyngeal area, when I keep as much expansion as possible, meaning I don't collapse, especially up here in my upper body and my torso. keep that basic continuous support going. And I have a video about this. I will put it up here or up here. I don't know which way it is always, like up here. That continuous support is really important. And then as you end the pitch, you want to end it by stopping the airstream with your support muscles and not with closing the pipe. Yeah. So another way to gain better control is to do something dynamically. And a lot of times pitches aren't just cut off like yeah. So what you don't want to do is lean on the vocal cords so that at the very last split second we hear like a little accent, like I'm getting off the pitch by just leaning on my vocal cords. I want to keep that support at all times. So instead of yeah, I want to go yeah. I want to make sure I keep everything as open as possible. Another thing that helps you is by dynamically doing something. Sometimes we want to slightly taper off the pitch at the end, meaning just getting just a bit softer. It might not be perceivable by your audience, but it's something to help you take your support up a notch. So whenever you do something dynamically, getting softer, you have to activate your support even more. And for me, it always helps me. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm not just cutting it off, but I'm doing something dynamically. And by doing it dynamically and really focusing on keeping all the muscles working and not letting it just like, oh, I'm just relaxing into it. Of course, when it becomes more automatic to do all these processes, like your body will feel relaxed, but in certain places like your support, your pharyngeal space, that soft palate is lifted, and way back in your throat, you're really working hard. You're only working hard where it's necessary, and the rest of your body gets really decoupled. It's almost like it's detached from the rest of this. And these are the automatisms that you want to look for. In order to gain control over your pitch as you're holding it, let's just talk about a few strategies here. Sometimes you get flat singing a high pitch. It might be due to you not hearing yourself. A lot of times as you're singing a specific pitch on a specific vowel, specific frequency, since your ears are inside of your head, you perceive yourself differently. And so the vibrations that you feel and hear in your head might interfere with your actual hearing. I've had this happen a lot of times in the studio. Sometimes there are pitches where I just tend to be flat or sharp, although my perception, and I have really good hearing, my perception while I sang it wasn't that. But when I hear the recording, very clearly I can hear it. So sometimes it's just a matter of those frequencies interfering with your hearing. So if you know that, here is a tip. Change the vowel slightly. So instead of let it go, you might want to go let it go, just to try, just for practice. Let it go, maybe do it a little closed, a little open, and then kind of check where is your tendency, where is that tendency to go sharp or flat, and then really assess, is there too much pressure or is there too little pressure? Usually when I'm putting too much pressure on and the vowel isn't nice and rounded, meaning it has like very beautiful resonance without those sharp edges, edgy in a sense of having nice overtones, brightness, but not edgy in a sense that it's brassy and just kind of square sounding. When it's rounded, you have a much better chance to hearing it better because it doesn't have that brassy edge. And also when it's rounded, the tendency to push too hard and thus it ending up sharp, it just gets minimized. Sometimes you might have under tension and that causes you to be flat. And so maybe closing the vowel a bit to increase that subglottal pressure and that, really compression might help. So I'm just giving you all these little bits and pieces because these are all part of you controlling your voice. And sometimes it's a matter of maybe not hearing it correctly, which your hearing may be so awesome, but even the best musician in the world, sometimes frequencies just interfere and it's a little bit harder to hear certain things. Another thing that will really help you is to do something dynamically. It's the same principle as it was for the offset, the ending of a pitch. Doing something dynamically and doing something with vibrato really encourages like that activated support. When I have a very static tone and it's not doing anything dynamically and it's not doing anything vibrato wise, it just sits very statically. It's really hard to keep control because it's like your muscles just give out, and it's really hard to get the feeling for where am I at because there's no motion. So instead of yeah, and probably have the tendency to go flat, if I just dive down. If I add vibrato and dynamics, vibrato really helps you to have the center of a pitch, because basically you're kind of like oscillating to where you're just a little above and a little bit below the pitch. And so to find the center of something, it's a lot more rounded. It's easier. So yeah, you only have one frequency, and then when it's slightly off, it's very obvious. But when you go yeah, it's a lot easier to have that nice center of a pitch. So add vibrato when it's appropriate. I sing and it is so dynamic. I sing and it is so dynamic. And I sing, it is more dynamic. As I hold the pitch, I add vibrato. And sometimes I start straight. So your phrasing is really important in order to have control. The way you slide, the way you slur, the way you accent, the way you phrase and you progress throughout a musical phrase determines largely how it feels in your voice, because you don't want to be static. You want there to be motion. You want there to be forward motion. Well, this was kind of technical, but I hope you got something out of this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend who also might benefit from it. Check out all the free goodies I have on my website. I have a free 5-day belting challenge and lots of other good stuff. Check it out. I hope to see you soon. And until next time, always keep a song in your heart and always keep on singing. Bye now.